Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live stream of the Infinite Pathway Watch Party. I'm AJ Kavanagh.
I'm Tom Workman. Great to have you with us.
So we've got a great episode lined up for you, as always, as we continue our series today together. This episode is exactly what I don't want. Actually, it really is what I do want, but that's the title of the show today. Exactly what I don't want. Realizing the role of contrast. And boy, Tom, is that ever relevant right now?
Well, I have to say, like many of us, we've all sort of complained about the duality of our third dimension, of our time on Earth.
Yes.
And yet, one of the things that I learned from the guides was that we need to not sort of worry about it, because contrast is actually used to help us.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the duality. In other words, we appreciate warm only because we know cold, and we understand light only because of darkness. And so there is this really important concept here behind contrast that I hope it changes your mind as much as it changed ours.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot for us to explore and unpack today. I always love the wisdom of the guides, because they take a subject like contrast and they give you their unique perspective and their unique spin on it. And boy, is it ever helpful. So we want to welcome you to this episode.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for being with us. Big shout out to Sandra, who joins us always, and Claudia, who's always on as well. We really appreciate you joining us, and everyone else that is watching live on the Soul Search community, the Soul Search Facebook page there that we're live streaming to. We love our Soul Search community, and everyone that's joining us from our Speaking From Source community as well, who are watching on our Speaking From Source YouTube channel and over at our Speaking From Source Facebook page. We appreciate you.
And we even want to welcome everyone who's going to be watching this on a later broadcast. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching the episode. Thanks for being a part of this community. We want to remind you again that we are live for a reason. We have an active chat, and so we encourage you to add your comments into chat, to certainly comment and ask questions. We're happy to have a conversation after the episode and answer any questions, or just talk a little bit about some of the revelations you got from this episode. And I imagine there'll still be a lyric from a song.
There probably might be. We always include,
involved.
You can kind of see how we go along now and watch these episodes. They've got always sometimes a breath, and always sometimes a song lyric.
Always a breath, always a lyric.
Yeah, gotta like that. Gotta like that.
We'll investigate that as we start. So I'm excited to start the episode.
I'm excited to start the episode too. So we'll be with you, and of course at the end, as Tom mentioned, stick around for the Q&A. But we'll also be bringing in some comments through the show as well, and some banners to help you along the way with some questions to stimulate that discussion. So without further ado, let's get this party started.
All right.
Thomas Workman and AJ Kavanagh are intuitive channels who have a remarkable ability to speak for a spiritual collective they call the Guides. They are unique in that they channel the Guides together, sharing one mind as they deliver messages. The primary interest of the Guides is helping us all live consistently in the state of joy, accomplished through a set of simple practices they call the Infinite Pathway. The Infinite Pathway, Journey to Self-Realization.
Hi, I'm AJ Kavanagh.
And I'm Thomas Workman. Welcome to the Infinite Pathway, Journey to Self-Realization.
In this series, Thomas and I talk through some of the foundational principles that the guides we channel have shared with us.
Because by applying these truths, we can expand our consciousness and live lives of consistent joy.
Well, we've discussed some pretty important aspects over these first few weeks, our eternal nature and learning about the importance of energy and the energy that surrounds us.
How our thoughts can raise our vibration and help us live a life of more consistent joy.
And we've also talked about our freedom to make choices again and again and again that serve us better and lead us to the things we desire and the life we wish to live.
And if you've been watching, you may have realized that all the principles build upon one another, giving us a greater view of how Source created us and is constantly expanding us through our soul's eternal journey, lifetime after lifetime.
And these next two episodes are no exception, as the guides help us grow in our understanding of the experiences we tend to see as negative or unwanted, but are actually one of the ways that the universe helps us grow to expand our consciousness.
That's right. In this episode, we're going to introduce the concept of contrast and let the guide show us the essential role it plays in our lives.
Now, we live in a world of contrast, and thank goodness for that. I mean, can you imagine having the exact same experience every day, just like poor actor Bill Murray did in the movie Groundhog Day? I mean, even the things we love would eventually become less meaningful or appreciated. And what kind of life would that be?
Yeah, you raised an important point. We do welcome and even celebrate some forms of contrast, like the changing of the seasons. However, when you think about it, much of the contrast we experience is just variety, as both sides of the spectrum have some positive aspects for us to enjoy in moderation.
Right. Even though some people prefer a warm climate instead of a cold one, many of us love the variety of living in a place that offers us some of both.
Yep, I do too. But other contrasts in our lives introduce experiences that are not what we expect or hope for. This kind of contrast can make us feel downright miserable, like having a significant issue with our health or an unexpected downward turn of our financial affairs.
Yes. And at one time or another, we've all faced situations of contrast that we'd rather do without. Now, as you can imagine, the guides have shared some fascinating insight on the topic of contrast, so much so that we can't fit it into just one episode. So we'll continue our conversation in the next episode, where we'll be talking about thinking beyond our circumstances.
It all sounds great, but enough of the intro. Let's dig in.
All right.
As usual, there are a few basic principles we need to understand first about how the universe views contrast. Let's hear the guides as they explain.
We wish to speak of this in great detail, for it is so very important for you to understand. So let us begin by discussing contrast. For contrast is a part of the universe, and we remind you that duality was not an error, it was not a mistake. There are no mistakes in creation, and it has a purpose for you appreciate warmth through the cold, and you understand satiation through hunger or thirst. You have at all times contrast that is enabled to heighten an understanding for you of both components. So we would say to you, dear one, that yes, there is darkness, and yes, darkness exists as the absence of light. See it as a duality. See the spectrum moves from the highest of light to the darkest of dark. And yet understand that this enables you always, as all contrast does, to make a choice, to decide which you wish to live in, which serves you best.
Right out of the gate, the guides introduced the concept of duality and explained that it has a very important purpose.
Let's talk about this a bit, because this is one of the more important aspects of our human existence. The guides teach that we can view every aspect of our reality as a spectrum with two distinct and opposite endpoints or polarities. In our current third dimensional reality, we tend toward focusing on those endpoints like good or bad, rather than all the possibilities in between. Yet, even as we expand our consciousness and see the full spectrum available to us, we'll still always have those two polarities to help us make our choices. It's funny. The concept of duality often gets a bad rap in consciousness circles.
Well, that's very true, and I think it's because, duality tends to limit us to the either or situation, even though there's much more to the two opposing sides to any reality. But the guides are making an important point about how viewing every aspect of our lives on a spectrum with two opposite ends is how we actually make sense of our reality. So there's good and there's bad, right and wrong, hungry and satiated.
Warm, cold, asleep, awake, satisfied, unsatisfied, happy, sad.
Yeah. I get it. The list goes on and on and on.
All of these polarities we just mentioned are essential elements of the universe, and they help us in a number of ways. So if you're one of the many who are contrast averse, this episode is for you.
Contrast averse, is that even a real word?
Probably not. But there really is a psychological condition called contrast avoidance, which explains why some people don't do well when they experience the opposite of what they want or expect.
Always the academic, but I love it. Anyway, back to more of what the guides have to say about contrast and how this serves us. They explain it best with this quote. It is contrast that enables you to see more clearly. It is hard for you to appreciate the morning without the night. Yes, it is hard for you to appreciate warmth without the cold. And so it is the nature of the universe to utilize this contrast.
Well, it certainly is easier to understand something better by seeing its opposite.
Exactly. For example, we have a greater understanding of peace when we have conflict and vice versa. Or we have a better appreciation of sweet once we've experienced sour. Although we may not always like the contrast, the guides have an interesting perspective on why contrast exists. And they say, contrast is a tool of yours. It is your servant. It is there for you to assist you.
Well, let's dig into some of the ways that contrast serves us. In addition to enhancing our understanding, the guides say that the experience of contrast in our lives is how the universe helps us to discover what we want and what we don't want, so that we can make choices that better serve us. Here's an example of one of their statements.
It is important for you to ask on a regular basis, what is it that I want? And to recognize that the contrasts that exist within your life are designed to help refine for you. For how shall you know the beauty of a sunny day without the rainy day, without the cloudy day? And this contrast is serving you.
Now, that clarity about what we want by experiencing what we don't want occurs on a variety of levels.
It sure does. There's contrast in our personal lives, which helps us better understand our personal preferences and desires. For example, through contrast, we may realize that we prefer doing lots of little projects, or we may realize that we prefer to focus on one major single project that may even last a lifetime. Here's the guides describing this to us in a different way. They say, and so the sum of your life's experiences, the contrasts that you have lived, are opportunities for you to clarify what you want, often from what it is that you do not want. And these two things work hand in hand for you to refine what your desires may be and to set them clearly within you.
It's just like that song by Pharrell Williams. The one that was featured in the 2013 classic film Despicable Me 2. Here's what they sing. This rainy day is temporary. The contrast is why we got 'em. The sun shining through is just a cloud away. So what? You're blowing a fuse. Well, that happens to us all. When I come with great news, the day could change.
Well, that works. But really, Despicable Me Too?
Why not? All right, moving on. On the other hand, some contrast helps us think about what we want in our collective environment so that we can decide together the kind of world we want to live in.
For example?
Well, there are many, from civil rights to political philosophies. I think a lot of us experience the news of war and violence and crime as a way of realizing together that the world we'd prefer to live in is one where people are kind and respectful to one another.
Yes. In this way, contrast can, if we're conscious of it, help us recognize what we as a collective humanity actually value. Contrast really is the basis of civilization and every culture and society that's ever been.
That's true. And it's one of the reasons why so many humans are becoming increasingly conscious of the contrast that exists in our civilization right now, which is all calling us towards oneness. Here's how the guides explain it.
So critical for you as humanity to rediscover, for it is a part of why you are feeling in so much chaos at the time. Notice how when chaos emerges, it always emerges as a gift, for this is how the universe always operates. We remind you, you know this already. We remind you that the universe only works for your greatest and highest good, the greatest and highest good of all of its creation, including us, including all other beings. And so when chaos emerges, chaos is brought down as a tool that can allow you to remember and allow you to seek a different choice, for the choice is not working now. The choice that you have made is perhaps not serving you well. And by you, we mean all of you, all of humanity.
Here's where the guides introduce the idea that some contrasts can feel like chaos. I think many of us, just by looking at current world events, would agree that the contrast out there certainly seems like chaos. In all forms of contrast, the lesson it's trying to teach us is to move past our discomfort to see where the contrast leads us to improvement. They talk about this very point in another channeling. Many occasions of your lives will provide a contrast to show you what it is that you do not want. And these things can manifest as well. That can be caught quickly in order for you to say quickly, this is not what I wanted. Then to return to what it is that you do want, what it is that you are interested in, what it is that you believe will cause you great benefit or serve you well.
So the contrast we're seeing right now, freedom, control, judgment, acceptance, compassion, disdain, hatred, love, are all helping us collectively and individually decide what is most important to us and to our survival as a species.
Decade after decade, century after century, history is full of examples of how our collective choices lead to societies that flourished and those that have since declined. Here's how the guides talk about our current world events as a matter of contrast.
The contrast on your planet now is quite extreme and will continue to be so as portions of your planet, of your humanity, struggle with their desire for power, with their desire of greed, with their wishing to own all and to control all. And yet you are feeling, as are your fellow humans, that this is not of your best service. This does not necessarily serve you as a whole well. And so the opportunities for you to wish for something more, we encourage you now to take the events of your world now and to make your wishes known to the universe. I wish for a kinder planet. I wish for a more loving planet. I wish for a planet that is able to share its unending resources. I wish for a planet that is able to feel its natural inborn compassion. These, as well as many others, are there for you, especially during the energies of this time. And so we encourage you to allow yourself to see through the conflict, to not allow it to daunt you, to not allow it to frighten you, for that is not its purpose. Or we remind you that the purpose of all of this contrast, whether it be the traffic that you find yourself in when you are driving, or whether it be the conflict that is occurring across the planet, and to instead realize this is your opportunity to wish for something that serves you and your fellow humans better and in greater, expanded, improved ways.
Wow. So, the more conscious we are to recognize and learn from contrast, the more we evolve into a civilization that thrives.
I like that idea of us learning from contrast as a way of improving us, and the guides have more to share along those lines.
What we speak of with you tonight is integration. It is an understanding of your ability to take the additional illumination that is coming to you as it comes to you, as you experience the contrast, and not to allow the contrast to create despair, but instead to recognize what is underneath the contrast, what it is that you're seeing, so that you may set your intentions and integrate these into the whole of what it is you are wanting and what it is that you are needing.
The guides mention one of our, and certainly my, greatest challenge when we experience contrast. Instead of making active decisions from the insights that contrast provides, we respond emotionally to the contrast, feeling anger, despair, or any number of negative emotions that are based on lower vibrational thinking.
Yeah, the guides understand us humans perfectly, including our tendency to focus on the problem instead of the solution. The guides often remind us that by focusing on what we don't want just attracts more of the same. Like when we worry about a bill to pay, only when we get more bills that need to be paid in the mailbox.
Right? Because the universe never says no. So whatever we focus on becomes what we manifest. A great example of this is the contrast between lack and abundance. The guides have helped many people who tell stories about what they don't have and ask why abundance keeps eluding them. It's difficult for many of us to see this connection between where we focus our thoughts and the outcomes we experience.
Yep, it's consciousness 101. We get what we think about. And I need to be reminded of that pretty often.
I do too. It's so easy for me to focus on the negative end of the spectrum and decide that because of the contrast I'm viewing in my life right now, I'm destined to be miserable for the rest of my life.
Oh my goodness. Yep. All we need to do is to use a negative to find the positive end of the spectrum and focus there. Here's a great example of how the guides discuss this. We wish to talk about the idea of assigned meaning. Often when you look at various aspects of your life or your conditions, specifically in the 3D physical realm, you see the extremes of contrast. You see the light and the dark. You see this duality, as it were. And based perhaps on your experiences, you may assign them as bad or negative or something to look out for or something to be removed. Whereas in the larger universe, we look at this as just as an aspect of the universe. There will always be contrast. There will always be the light and the dark, for we do not assign a meaning to it in that same way. We wish to perfectly illustrate this with the symbol of the yin and the yang. You see it is in a perfect whole with no beginning and no end. It is complete with the aspects of light and dark, each containing aspects of light and dark within it. And the nature of the symbol represents fluidity, motion, but also perfect balance. This is from the vantage upon which you are to view your circumstances and duality in this sense.
Yeah, I want that perspective. Imagine how viewing the contrast in our lives from a neutral perspective, without assigning good or bad or right or wrong, might enable us to focus on the ways that contrast is working for us and not against us.
Yes, that's exactly what Source wants for us to understand. And this is exactly what Source desires for us as well. We'll dive into this more in our next episode when we talk about how we deal with the many and varied circumstances that are in our lives. But for now, the guides want us to consider the idea of releasing the stories we tell about how contrast is ruining our lives and instead to surrender to what contrast is there to show us.
Those stories declare what is wrong with the world and that we need to do something about it. Pass a law, protest in the streets, write another blog decrying injustice. But the guides suggest a very different approach, where we trust the universe and its process of evolution, where we allow all things to unfold towards our greatest and highest good. Here's what they said recently.
We return again to the nature of surrender, yet it seems quite a dichotomy when there is such duality about the idea that you are doers and you wish to do, and yet the idea that you are protected and this is part of the divine path. Simply allow things to unfold in the natural order in which they should, for after any storm there is a clearing and a brighter horizon and new and often better endeavors to be held ahead for you.
And yet, dear ones, there is far more than simply survival of a storm we wish to explain to you. There is instead a beautiful gift of a perspective that you may maintain in good and bad times. It is not simply a matter of preparing you for disaster. No, this is not the point of this transmission. The point of this transmission is far more around your ability to replace what has become preoccupying for you, the funding and the income and expenses, the pains and aches, the challenges, all these things, good or bad, in plenty or in lack. Yeah, simply things that are not meant to preoccupy, but simply to work through. We also suggest to you that the emotions that you feel during times when you reflect upon your planet or the inhumanity, your lack of consciousness of those that are around you, this too is merely something to allow to pass through you rather than to latch on to, for latching on creates great despair.
Let's listen to the guides pull all this together for us.
This period of time is a beautiful opportunity for you to expand, and expansion requires contrast. We have said to you before many times that it is contrast that does its work in your growth and evolution. It is the contrary. It is not the comfortable, and it is not the known that is what enables you to grow. It is instead those things that are distinct and different and new, and because of that uncomfortable. Yet we would remind you in the midst of chaos, for we know and can see the amount of chaos that surrounds you, perhaps individually, but certainly collectively. The chaos that surrounds you is doing its work. And so we would recommend to you to, instead of being focused on the chaos and seeing what is being told to you around the world, for you have this unique ability of knowing everything that is happening across your world almost instantly. And we would say to you that instead of allowing yourself to focus all of your attention in that chaos, to instead allow yourself instead to see the product of the chaos. For as we are saying to you, all chaos is leading you toward evolutionary growth. It is leading you to a higher position. It is leading you to greater outcomes.
Did you catch that? The chaos around us is leading us to greater outcomes rather than our destruction. What a great way to view all of the contrast around us right now. by realizing that what we may feel like as being chaos is actually evolution at work. Contrast and even chaos exposes those aspects of our lives and our civilization that we don't want for the very purpose of focusing us on improvement.
That's pretty amazing and a great relief.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, as we've said at the top of the episode, there's much more for us to explore and understand around the idea of contrast and the experiences in our lives that can lead us to despair. And we'll take up those in our next episode.
You know, I know we are both so grateful for the guides providing these messages. I mean, aren't you glad to know that we don't have to let the contrast in our lives defeat us?
Oh, yeah, more than words can say. So, how can we put what we've learned from the guides into something like a daily practice for our viewers?
I'm glad you asked.
Well, it was in the script, Tom.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, our first practice we'll call What Did I Learn? You can devote a meditation time to this or use a journal if you prefer.
What we're suggesting here is to identify something you have learned about yourself from an experience of contrast. Now, I remember when I was a teenager and starting out going to parties and drinking and sometimes getting drunk. And I learned that while others actually enjoyed drinking, I didn't like the taste of alcohol or the effects that it had on me. And I also learned from that experience that the environment was not for me either. I far more enjoyed the experience of being fully present and having meaningful conversations with people.
Perfect. So the contrast helped you know who you are better. All of us have learned about ourselves often by living the opposite of who we are. And that's okay, because as the guides say, that's how we learn about ourselves.
Yes. And I had to stop apologizing too, because a lot of people would criticize me for not drinking. And, you know, I'm fine with that. This contrast enabled me to strengthen and like the I am that I am.
Yeah, a lot of times we read statements of judgment in the choices that we make.
Very true.
So, what we want you to do in this practice is to create a list of those aspects of yourself that are now clear to you and think about how the experience of contrast brought you to this understanding.
I find this a really good self-affirming practice. But just remember, you never have to apologize for who you are.
Our second practice is to pivot our negative reactions to contrast by realizing quickly what we want instead. Thinking about what we want keeps the contrast from lowering the vibration of our thoughts. You can do this at any moment when contrast is bringing up negative thoughts and emotions for you.
Right. So the more you reflect on what you're learning from contrast, the better you can take on this practice, which is asking, what am I to learn in the moments where I experience contrast?
I use this practice often. Whenever I experience a contrast that starts to upset me, I try to quickly say to myself, well, now I know what I don't want. So what would I prefer instead?
We've mentioned the concept of pivoting our thoughts before, and this is one of the best instances for this practice. It's taking full advantage of duality to move you closer to what you want.
One last practice. The guides are teaching us here that simply identifying what we want is only the start. Once we know what we want, we can set our intentions toward it, trust the universe in providing it, and manifest that reality.
So we recommend another list, the world I want to live in. Based on the contrast you've experienced, what reality would you rather prefer? Write these as direct statements, just like the guide suggested. I want to live in a community where humans treat one another with respect, or I want to experience greater abundance. You know, it doesn't really matter what you want. It only matters that you articulate it to the universe clearly and set out that intention.
Perfect. Well, we hope today's episode has helped you shine through the contrast in your life. Just know, all things are working for your greatest and highest good always. It is the nature and intent of the universe. And we'll say that again, episode after episode. We'll leave you with one more inspirational quote from the guides and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for joining us.
We see many humans now who have allowed themselves to travel along the stream of great despair and great worry. And this is not what we wish for you, for it is not necessary. It is not critical for you. Instead, your refocusing, your change of perspective allows all these things to flow and occur as they must, for they will all pass through. They will all move along. You know with us that nothing stands still, that nothing is solid. Even you, even your own form is not solid, is not set, but is in constant transformation. We wish you great joy. We wish you a great understanding of all that is possible for you, and we cheer on your expansion for all it is doing for the remainder of humanity, who shall see your light and be able to understand what is available for them. We share our love with you and leave you with our energies from Source itself, so that you may realize the depth of love that is available to you. And with this, we are complete.
Coming up in the next episode of The Infinite Pathway. For the latest messages from Thomas, AJ, and the guides, please join them on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, or follow them on Instagram at Speaking From Source. You can also book your personal session with the guides on their website, speakingfromsource.com.
Wow, how about that?
If you ever want to read those credits, just actually watch the broadcast.
You can do that too.
They're there. We just didn't want to waste your time because they're the same. There's so much in this episode that we can really talk about, and I can't help but notice how perfect this is right now, because we could count the number of times. We could do a drinking game of the number of times they say chaos in this episode.
Right.
And chaos is probably what a lot of us are feeling right now, really right now. There seems to be quite a bit of chaos going on.
And this is globally.
Upside down.
Globally, we're feeling this.
Yeah, things are just upside down. But again, the point is clear to 2 points. The first point is, if we stay focused there, nothing good happens and we just manifest more of it.
Right.
It just makes us miserable. And so the real point of it is that we're able to sort of say, what do I want instead? And if you notice, contrast is doing its work, because more and more of us are going, not what I want. I don't want a world where we're all the same. I like that we're diverse. I like our diversity, for example. And there are 1,000 other things. I like law. I like knowing that people all follow the same law, and that there's some equilibrium, and it doesn't just benefit some versus others. All of this, the guides have told us, is to refine what we want collectively. And so the more you and I focus on what we want out of the chaos you're seeing right now, so here's the perfect chance to practice this, right? And it just strikes me so strongly that this is really so appropriate right now. Hey, I really appreciate a lot of your comments. I want to talk about one specifically that we received from Gladys. And
yeah, she said, what if I don't like my choice but can't reverse it?
Yeah.
Like, I gave up my puppy for adoption, but I can't get her back, and now my heart is broken.
So I want to challenge the can't reverse it part. And you're right, there are some choices that are not reversible. We have to fully explore that. But here's the point I really want to get us to. Sometimes we can put ourselves in a corner and give the universe a very limited choice, right? So sometimes we wind up saying, and so there's a lesson for us to learn about the way we process all of this contrast, because we can say, my car's broken down, but I have to have a Buick Regal.
Yeah.
And so the universe has to bring me in. Anything else is unsatisfying for me. And we kind of put the universe in a corner. And we say it has to be this versus that. And what I think is so interesting, AJ and I live by a phrase that we use a lot. In fact, we use to buy the house we're in right now.
I know what that phrase is, and that phrase is this or something better.
In other words, it's important to give the options that exist for us because we dig into the real issue of our desire. And so, Gladys, the issue of your desire is companionship, right? And what you felt from that puppy, and for whatever the circumstances were that had you have to give up that puppy. Be careful, because it's easy to sort of say it's that puppy or nothing. And the universe says, oh no, there are all kinds of things that can give you the same feeling as that puppy. And the whole point of having the puppy was to learn that.
Yes.
Was to discover that. And so many, many more options available. It doesn't stop the hurt. We get it. We know how hard it is sometimes to face the circumstances that are causing the contrast. And yet, I think there's something wonderful about saying, I'm going to say this or something better, and open myself to the universe to give me that something better.
Yeah, it really is interesting because, we often see change or contrast or the things that we don't want, like even the losses that happen in our lives, the loss of a home or the loss of a friendship or a relationship, as something that's tragic, and yet it can lead us to the things that we do want, or it can provide space and opportunity for something new to come in. And you're quite welcome, Gladys. The guides have this marvelous ability to get to the feeling or the question below the question, or the meaning behind the situation. And that really is the power of a private channeling session, actually.
The desire behind the want.
Yes.
Right? The real desire behind the want. And Gladys, we know you. We know your heart.
Yes.
So we know that heart has such great capacity that it can get filled in many, many ways. Companionship sounds like what you're after. So let's just focus the universe on supplying that companionship. And for us, let's focus on supplying that order, and supplying for us sort of those things that, as they're being taken away right now, help us to say, oh, but I really do want this or want that or like this or like that. And the more of us who do that, the better. So I can't encourage us enough right now to focus, instead of complaining about everything going on. And we get it. We feel it all the time. But as the guides say, where we place our attention is where we manifest. And so rather than our sort of saying, can you believe what those idiots in Washington did today? That instead we say, I see what happened today, and I know what I want instead.
Yes.
And I share with others that same desire. I want a planet that is able to accept one another's differences. I want a planet that is not based in greed and profit. I want a planet that's based in justice, perhaps. And so the more we continue to focus on that collectively, the more power we give the universe to use contrast and work it through.
Yeah, it's interesting. The guides do say here, the more conscious we are of contrast, the more we can make new choices and then thrive out of that.
Yeah.
So, often, even though we're in this sort of chaos, it's enabling us to be aware of all of the possible scenarios of duality that is out there. Sometimes you don't know what you've got until it's taken away from you.
Now,
right?
Culture is what sometimes gets in our way, because I'm sure if there were people listening to this, they would say, these are the two greatest Pollyannas that ever lived. these little unicorns and rainbows and puppies and people. But I think it's really important to recognize that we do have a culture that sort of says, I should complain. That's what I should do. I should focus on what makes me miserable. I should just get really mad. And I'm going to tell you, I think anger plays a very important role for us, but it's not to simply keep us in this cycle of anger. It's to help us say, this is what I insist on instead. This is what I want instead. So,
Right. And interestingly enough, as more people do that, that's when the consciousness rises. And that's where we get to some of the things that we're really striving for when it comes to empathy and understanding and oneness and inclusion and, concern about the environment, for example, because we're all impacted by that, right? It's not a sort of a pocket issue somewhere. It's something that affects us all. And so contrast when it comes to a big storm or a flood or an earthquake or something like that, as tragic as it is, it does make us aware that, hey, we're all under the one sky,
So all kinds of ways that you can live that, all kinds of ways you can practice that. And what I really think the guides are getting us to, and you've probably seen it in some of the Wisdom Wednesdays if you've been reading them, because the guides have been talking about this a lot lately, is how we make individual decisions and behaviors that speed up the desires that we have, the world that we want to live in. And so something as simple in the midst of all this deportation, that we celebrate someone's culture and that we find out and learn more about someone who's in a different cultural background than we are, for example.
Right. And we're seeing displacement all over the world of one kind of another. And, that teaches us so much. It really does.
I'll be welcoming, right? Rather than kicking out, I'm going to let in. And when I do that, I shift the energy and I start to create that change. And so I can't say enough that this is not just a mental exercise. This is really important that we start to live the opposite spectrum of what we want.
Yeah. And remember, it's an abundant universe. Whenever you get into that idea of scarcity or lack of resources or ability or anything like that, it's not the nature of the universe. The nature of the universe is a giving, expanding, creating universe, just like the nature of love. When you're truly sharing love, whether you're in love or just sharing love, it's an infinite energy that just keeps on going out there and expanding.
Now, did you notice the point early in the beginning? Because I have to keep returning to this to remind myself that, in fact, there is always going to be duality. But as we grow in our consciousness, we start to recognize all the spots along the spectrum.
Right.
Isn't that fascinating?
Right.
That, I certainly earlier in my life lived most of my life in the either or category. I could only see things one way or the other. And it's been very helpful to sort of think about what's in between. What's in the middle of that?
And, Sandra raises a good point here, too. She realized that she had to distance herself from some people to stay out of a negative mindset. But it's okay to love people from afar. So it wasn't, an either or situation. She could still, separate herself from those relationships and yet love and pray for them and hold them in a good space from afar and to bless them on. And really, that is what it is all about. It's not just an either or situation.
I don't have to pray for your destruction.
Right.
I simply have to move away a little bit from distance in order for me to appreciate you better and appreciate you from afar. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. That's all that lives in the middle of that spectrum that says I don't have to love or hate you, that I can simply give myself the distance that I need so that I can appreciate you without getting caught up in your drama or whatever it is, your negativity.
Yeah, and it's like some people like linguine and other people like gnocchi. It's still a pasta, but it's a different. it's a different pasta, right?
It's just like that.
It's just like that.
It's just like that. World conflict, just like
that. So easy.
Exactly.
All right, then. Listen, bless you. We're so grateful that you've been on with us today, whether you're watching us live or enjoying the replay. We would invite you actually to take a look at our new website, speakingfromsource.com, where we've launched a beautiful community there called the Circle of Light. And this is where we're kind of focusing on the things that we do want, right, Tom?
And there's an opportunity. This is so important to us. The guides have made it so important to us that we help us gather together as a community to do that communal work. And so Circle of Light Community, in addition to offering you opportunities to talk to the guides through Live with the Guides and some other things, has some discussion areas where you can share your thoughts and dreams and wishes and problems and concerns with other like-minded people. Right? So it gives us a chance to be together and to work together and to never feel alone.
Yeah.
Never feel separated, because we are all connected. And so come join the Circle of Light. Don't ever have to feel you have to do all this by yourself.
Yeah, and we'll be in that community often and interacting with you as well. So head over to speakingfromsource.com. At the very top of the menu bar there, you'll see a community tab. Click on that. There's a monthly membership option. It's only $22 a month. Or if you wanted to be a founding member and join annually, you'll also get to be included in our Live with the Guides, which is a phenomenal group channeling that we do every month. And that's only $224 right now.
Yeah, it's an extra discount if you choose the annual option. We just wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to join. Because again, our mission from the guides is to bring us all together.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, we've got another great episode coming up next Thursday.
Next Thursday, we're going to talk more about contrast by talking specifically about some of our circumstances and how we think through them in ways that are productive and not destructive.
Yeah, we often get that idea of, why did this happen to me? I'm such a good person. I never do this or I never do that, and that this situation has happened to me. And once again, the guides have that remarkable ability to see beneath it all and to say, well, actually, this is what's happening here with your circumstances, and this is where it's leading you. And it's always leading you to something better, believe it or not.
And so I have to say, this has really been the greatest honor to be able to channel the guides, because we start to see that what the guides are really trying to help us do is live a life of joy by helping us clear out those things that keep getting us blocked from living that joyful life. And so delighted to have you along for the ride, and thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for a great conversation. Let's have some more, both in the circle as well as at next week's episode.
Absolutely. We appreciate you, and we'll see you again next Thursday. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.